I used to think that you could love someone into loving themselves. In fact, I used to have a sticky note on my desk that said, I will love you until you love yourself. And that sounds beautiful and it feels good, but it's actually not at all practical. You see, I see this all the time. And you actually can't love a person who doesn't have self love into loving themselves. And in relationships, we actually have to set limits on what we're willing to tolerate. Now, with kids, yes, we want to show them what healthy love looks like. It's our job to teach them, to guide them. And parenting requires three things: nurturing, guidance, and limits. We love our kids unconditionally. We set limits with love. And when they're adults, sometimes those limits, unfortunately, might require some distance, but that doesn't mean we don't love them. Unconditional love is for parenting. It is not for romantic relationships. You cannot give your partner the love that they didn't get from their parents. That's something that they have to learn to do for themselves, and they have to want it bad enough to do the hard work. And now, understanding where harmful behaviors come from is a good first step. And often that comes from trauma. Now, it's not enough to just understand where these harmful behaviors come from. I mean, you can be understanding forever, but someone's past trauma is not a pass to treat you or your kids badly. Pia Mellody, the renowned therapist and author, taught us that there isn't just one form of abuse, but there are actually two. There's disempowering abuse, which is making a child feel helpless or unworthy. But there's also false empowerment. So feeding or allowing a child's superiority, entitlement, selfishness, or meanness. And we can allow this as parents and not hold it in check, or we can also model this. So false empowerment can also come from modeling. So an adult who behaves in selfish or entitled or superior ways and with superiority and is mean teaches a child, I get to behave this way as an adult, which means that the child, as they grow up, sees that's how an adult behaves and that's how I get to behave. So disempowerment leads to shame, and false empowerment leads to grandiosity. Now, most therapists ignore modeling as one of the things that shapes us. Social psychology actually gives quite a lot of focus on how modeling shapes us. Either way, grandiosity is often passed on through modeling. So, for example, if a child gets beat, it's disempowering for that child, but it also teaches them this is what an angry adult looks like. So as they grow up, it becomes normal for them to speak with venom or to yell, hit, or throw things. Terry Real, the founder of relational life therapy, says, at its best, effective trauma work can heal deep pain within an individual. But on its own, does it have the power to transform someone's personality, their basic character structure? I don't think so. On its own, will it cure addictions or permanently stop abuse or grandiose behaviors? I see no evidence to support that. On its own, does trauma treatment teach individuals essential relationship skills, how to assert oneself lovingly, how to negotiate, or the steps of repair? Not at all. Terry Real goes on to also say that as a trained addictions expert and a practicing couples therapist for decades, he says, I find claims that trauma work will stop addictions, grandiose traits, or even halt offensive behaviors to be wishful thinking. And in psychotherapy, wishful thinking can do harm, not in what we offer, but in what we tell ourselves and our clients, we no longer need to offer. Now, it's really unfortunate that too many therapists still believe that if to heal underlying wounds, that selfish, addictive, or even abusive behaviors will dissipate. And so that's no wonder that there's the belief that narcissists can't be treated, because they certainly can't be helped like this. Simply treating their wounds without addressing their grandiosity doesn't change behaviors at all. And when it comes to irresponsible, selfish behaviors, volatile tempers, lying, gaslighting, entitlement, we don't have bad parts, but we definitely have parts that behave badly. These parts don't have to run our lives, and they don't have to run our relationships. And that's why in relational life therapy, we're about personality transplants. We see people overcome so-called narcissistic behaviors all the time. And it really starts with developing a relationship with the inner child, learning to parent ourselves in the ways that we didn't get the parenting we needed from our parents, which means we have to love ourselves. We have to learn to set limits. We hold ourselves with love and warm regard. This is hard to do, and it requires practice. It requires self-esteem work, and it requires boundary work. Now, healthy self-esteem is rare in our culture. The meaning that my essential worth is neither greater nor lesser than anyone else's. So it ends up that you can't love another until they love themselves, because intimacy, closeness, warm, loving relationships demand self-esteem work by both partners. So when it comes to setting limits on what you're willing to tolerate, especially if you haven't done this in the past and it's something that you're learning to do, a big part of that is learning to stay grounded when your partner is being childish. It means that we have to also do our own inner work. And we can approach this with what I call loving power. I will cherish you, and I cherish the relationship, and I will stand up for myself and be assertive at the same time. Now, that means being connected and powerful at the same time. So when it comes to, often couples will get into this battle of who's right and who's wrong. Well, no, we left at 7 o'clock. No, we actually left at 6 o'clock. When you're arguing about who's right, when it comes down to it, who's right and who's wrong, well, who cares? Because you can be relational or you can be right. And so look at it as, how are we going to operate as a team to make this work for all of us? Not, how am I going to be a doormat and let you treat me badly because you have deep wounds? But how are we going to work as a team and make this work for all of us involved? Now, loving power is a revolution, because under patriarchy, you can be loving or you can have power, but they're disconnected. So the trick is not to move from disempowered to controlling, but the move is to actually break the dynamic altogether. So when you have to set limits with your partner, you do it with love. You do it with, I appreciate you. I have a positive intention, because where I want to end up is, and speak clearly, what you want is more closeness, more connection, or what you want is a specific outcome, and you need to find a way to make it work for both of you. Now, wounds get passed on from one generation to the next, and so too does entitlement. The psychotherapy field has been dealing with only half of the issue. They've been dealing with the wounds, and they've been ignoring or excusing the other half, the entitlement. As Terry Real says, over the years, I've seen countless individuals go off for intense trauma work, have extraordinary revelatory experiences, and they return home unchanged in their relational immaturity. Therapists will heal your wounds, but they offer little to help take the sword from your hands. So it's our turn to stand up and say we're no longer going to be treated like this just because of your woundings. But it's okay to stand up and say, I need you to learn how to be more relational instead of just nurse your wounds. Now, patriarchy protects perpetrators because they're not addressing the anti-relational superiority, selfishness, entitlement, those grandiose behaviors. And traditional therapy, sadly, until traditional therapy stands up and deals with those behaviors, instead of believing that narcissism can't be treated, then traditional therapy will also continue to protect perpetrators. So, as a recap, it is not your job to love your partner unconditionally. It's totally appropriate and necessary to set limits on what you're willing to tolerate in your relationship. Unconditional love is for parenting. It is not for romantic relationships. And we can each only provide unconditional love for ourselves. That takes work. It takes practice. It's a skill that can be developed. Now, when your partner is being difficult, you can learn to stay grounded. That requires work of your own. And whatever you do that helps you regulate your nervous system, you can learn some really powerful tools there, and you probably already have some. When you start setting limits that haven't been set before, do it with loving power. Because remember that your goal is to have warmth and connection, and you don't need to have, it may turn into a fight, but you don't need to participate in the fight. You can hold your ground and still be loving. Now, relational joy is what sustains us and fulfills us. Disconnection is what's hurting us. And when we self-medicate, self-medication comes from the pain of not having warm, loving, connected relationships in our lives.